Good evening. Welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, and TwinCitiesGeek.com. So yeah, it's the holiday season, and it's been quite busy. There's been a lot that's been happening in terms of movies. For your consideration season, so we've been getting tons of screeners like this. I have like a handful around me here. I've got like a few there that I've seen. So, some of these I've already covered and some I've yet to cover, but we'll try to knock out a few of them, but we're mostly just going to be talking about the big films. That being said, I eventually will get around to covering some of the bigger awards ones as we get closer to award season. But of course, we've got to cover the big holiday blockbusters this year, and we've got quite a few. On today's stream, we're going to be covering Violent Night, the violent Santa Claus movie. I don't quite want to say Die Hard because it's a little bit more than that, so we'll cover that. And then, of course, opening this weekend, we have Avatar: The Way of Water, the sequel to James Cameron's 2009 sci-fi epic. And then we'll also be talking about Sam Mendes' new film, Empire of Light. It's a bit of like a... not quite like melodramatic, I don't want to say, but like kind of a dramatic 1980s romance, which is a little bit of a change of pace. If you're familiar with like Sam Mendes' other more notable films, it's a bit of a change of pace here. And then if we have time, we'll get to covering a few of the other films, such as Fire of Love, a documentary about two volcanologists, Goodnight Oppie, about the Opportunity rover, and Till, the period drama about Emmett Till. All right. So we'll get to covering some of the big ones this week. Let's see, which one should we start off with? Why not? We'll start off things a little bit. Let's say, I say like a little bit light, but like Violent Night is not like an easy-ish watch, but it is fun. So we'll start off with that one. Oh boy, it's been a while. Like this was released like a few weeks ago, but it's worth talking about. Still a lot of fun. Let me just get my notes up here so we're ready to go. Okay, and 3, 2, 1. So Violent Night is a Christmas action horror comedy that feels like, I mean, like when you think about like all like the Christmas movies that are like Christmas subversion films, you know, stuff like, like Bad Santa and stuff like that. You kind of get a feel like, okay, like I can kind of expect like, you know, what type of comedy or action type of film this is supposed to be. But thankfully, Violent Night ends up being so much fun that, you know, it seems fairly early, but I dare say this is probably going to end up being like a Christmas classic that a lot of people are going to end up coming back to. Just because it is so much fun. This is such a delight. And here's the thing. This is the type of film where it could have just gone on autopilot. But I think it helps that you have director Tommy Wiseau, who you might remember he was behind like the Dead Snow movies, like Dead Snow and Dead Snow 2. Which kind of feels fitting, you know. Here you have another holiday film, and you have, you know, Dead Snow, the relation. But the thing is, like Dead Snow is and Dead Snow 2. Well, especially like Dead Snow 2 is a little bit more just fun on the premise alone, as opposed to what's present on screen. It's still a fun film, but you kind of feel like it's going through the motions. Thankfully, Violent Night doesn't feel like that. Violent Night feels like it's very much aware of the type of holiday film it wants to be, and also the type of Christmas movie that it wants to subvert and play around with and have fun with. And I think it helps that that the casting here is perfect. You have David Harbour, you might remember from Stranger Things. He's playing the legit Santa Claus. And they establish him right away as, like, you know, he's the real deal. They have, like, a big grand reveal of who he really is. But it's made right after he gets out of a pub and right after he vomits on somebody. So I like the idea of like establishing Santa as this kind of like curmudgeon-y person who's kind of grown disillusioned with the capitalist structure of Christmas. He basically hates that everyone only wants like money and video games now. And just hates the whole holiday season. So he makes the rounds, he does the deliveries, but he'll still drink and puke and piss and and do all manner of disgusting stuff in between his routes. And then he ends up coming to I believe it's was it Connecticut, or yeah, it's Connecticut, which Christmas in Connecticut reference there. He ends up going to Connecticut to the house of a wealthy family called the Lightstones, and it's a wealthy family where they're where the curmudgeon-y matriarch of the family, played by Beverly D'Angelo, basically kind of hates her family. She's rich, she's corrupt, she looks down on her family, and there's a lot to look down on there. She has a very a very one of those women who just really want to impress her mother just so that they can get the inheritance, because that's all that they're after. So you have a little bit of a clash between a superficial family and also another side of her family just wants to get back at her and try to not associate with them and try to make their own life. All those plans, it's chaotic enough in the household already before any chaos happens with violence. But then you have John Leguizamo come in with his team of terrorists who basically want to extort money that Beverly D'Angelo's character has stowed away. Because they feel like she doesn't rightfully deserve it. She's been sitting on it, and it's basically dirty money that other dirty people want. And I love the fact that John Leguizamo, basically, he hates Christmas. They establish that pretty clearly. This dude has it out for Christmas, so he feels nothing about robbing a family on Christmas. And to that same extent, his whole team just has these ridiculous names. His name is Mr. Scrooge, and I believe there's one of them is named Krampus, and there's they all have silly names like Candy Cane and Sugar Plum and Frosty and all these other goofy names. And here's the thing. That's silly. It's funny, but it's kind of okay, are they just going to harp on this the whole time? And what I love so much about Violent Night is that it doesn't harp so much on the obvious jokes, that it feels like having those little jokes in between kind of feel earned. Because the atmosphere is perfect here. It's set up it has the tone of a Christmas movie, and I think that is due in large part to the orchestral soundtrack. That sounds like it's straight out of a Home Alone movie, or a more or not so violent Christmas family movie. So it fits that tone well, while still leaning into the absurdity of it all. Because when Santa Claus shows up, he loses some of his powers and he's stuck there, and it's basically, I hate to boil the film down to this point, but it's kind of like Die Hard. It's basically Santa, he's lost some of his magic, he can't get out of there, and he's got to fight his way out, so he's going to fight some terrorists and try to save the one little girl of this family, Trudy, who is just such a wonderful child that even Santa with his cold heart can't see to have her Christmas ruined by terrorists. So it's David Harbour as Santa Claus versus a bunch of terrorists, and what proceeds from that is brilliant. All the fights that go down, they use a little bit of his magic here and there for some fun stuff, with this magic sack and his ability to go up chimneys. All that stuff leads to some funny and incredibly gory deaths. I love how the violence is if you're gonna name it Violent Night, you gotta live up to that name, especially if you're gonna make it an absurdist action film set around the Christmas season with horror elements. And it does, thankfully. There's a lot of creative kills here involving the stars on Christmas trees and sharpened candy canes, and there's a big shootout and fight that happens in the shed of this place, where a wood chipper is used, and in quite a fun and explosive way. And I guess the best way to describe just the overall tone of the violence and the action is in one scene when Santa Claus is finishing off one group of terrorists, and the last one that he kills, he takes an active grenade and shoves it down the guy's pants. And then Santa Claus just runs to safety And when he gets a fair distance amount of way, he stops and he says, okay, I gotta watch this. I gotta see what's gonna happen here. And he turns back, and then sure enough, the grenade explodes. Huge, bloody, gory mess everywhere. And he just laughs, just saying, holy shit, that was worth it. And that's basically Violent Night. It's like, here's all this ridiculous, absurd, and violent stuff, and we're just gonna, like, just lavish in it, show you all the cool stuff, show you all the fun and the grisliness of it, and basically just bask in, like, the dark humor of it all. And it plays around with it creatively enough where you don't mind so much, where there's easy bits of like subversion Christmas humor here and there, like with David Harbour saying, "Oh, Santa Claus is coming to town tonight," as a threat against the terrorists, and John Leguizamo's character singing a very off-key version of I believe like Silent Night, and it's meant to sound more sinister, but it just comes off as like corny and doesn't really work. But it feels like, like those easy bits of comedy, that they're earned because so much else is working in this film. Like the characters all have like perfectly vicious, biting dialogue that you want to laugh at, but at the same time it builds up their characters well. And it plays well into the whole theme here about, Santa Claus just being against like how greed has eroded the holiday. And I love the fact that like those who embellish too much of the greed get just the right amount of karma that's coming to them in this narrative. So like John Leguizamo, you immediately know something really horrible's got to happen to him. But then other characters like Jason Lightstone, played by Alex Hassel, who seems like he's a nice guy, but he does have like a twinge of greed in him. He gets just enough of karma. Like he suffers where like you feel like, okay, you had that coming, but like you don't deserve to get it as worse as everyone else does. So like there's a decent balance of karma here, and the greed message and like with anti-capitalism is very vocal. Like they don't try to hide it. Like by the end of the film, part of the climax literally involves them burning money. Like, it's like, it barely does, like, they rationalize it by saying, like, oh, this will help Santa Claus, and it really doesn't, so they're just burning money for the hell of it. And it's just, it's so much fun on just every level, from the dialogue, to the violence, to the characters, and it's just such a treat to watch David Harbour just come into this role with ease and just have so much fun with it, with all the gruesome violence, and just make it feel bloody and brutal, and just it's so hilarious. Like I don't even want to reveal the big climax here of how John Leguizamo is finished off by Santa Claus. I'll just say it involves a chimney, and it pays off beautifully. So yeah, it's very much like I kind of feel like you almost have to be in the right mood for it, but if you've seen enough like Christmas films that want to be like, oh, like this ain't your daddy's like Christmas movie, or we're gonna be the subversive Christmas horror film. I feel like after having seen so many of those films, to have one like this that works so well on every level, and it's just so much fun. Like watching this with a crowd was just such a blast. Everyone was enjoying it. Everyone was like just like laughing, and some people were like wincing and going, oh my god, it's like the violence, while trying to hold back their laughter in between. It's just such a great feeling. It's so absurd, and I get the feeling that this is gonna be a Christmas classic. If you want some violent Christmas movies, saddle this right next to Black Christmas and The Green Knight for the most unorthodox of violent Christmas movies. So yeah, Violent Night is so much fun. What a lovely film. So Violent Night is currently playing in theaters. I think it's doing okay. I hope it stays in theaters for like a little bit longer, because it really needs to be part of like the Christmas season. I should double check who's it through? Universal? Okay, so it'll probably be on Peacock, like, I don't know. Like I would hope that it would be on like Peacock soon if they wanted to capitalize on it, But yeah, it will more than likely it'll probably be on like Peacock this January, so best to check it out in the theater if you can. I think it's doing all right at the box office too. So not great, but you know, you want to champion a film like this, especially when there's so many Christmas movies that are just duds. There are some Christmas movies that I'm not covering on this stream, mostly because like they're meh. They're not the worst thing I've ever seen, but they're so bland they're not worth mentioning. So this is the highlight. I dare say this is probably like the best Christmas movie you will see this holiday season, unless I don't know. Will this be the one? Let's see. Let me get my notes up here. All right. And talk about some Avatar. More blue aliens. Did you miss them? I'll bet you did. All right. So here we go in 3, 2, 1. So Avatar, The Way of Water, is the sequel to James Cameron's first film, just simply titled Avatar. And it's been a while since we've been to the world of Pandora with the giant blue aliens known as the Na'vi. It's been quite some time where I get the feeling like some people are going to be like, okay, why are we coming back to like Dances with Smurfs again? What more is there to do with this material? And thankfully, director James Cameron, he finds the ways to surprise you. He knows what makes for exciting and engrossing like filmmaking. And while it feels like this like a sequel to Avatar could just lean into like more of the same, and in some aspects with some of the tropes it kind of does, it does find some more visual beauty and allure, which, let's face it, that's going to be the primary reason why like a lot of people are going to end up going to this film. They just want to see something cool and epic and filled with like action and sci-fi elements. And to that degree, like the story here is pretty light. It's a bit, and when I say it's light, I mean like, you know, it's a little bit lighter than like most films. In terms of like comparison to like the first Avatar film, it's a little bit of a heftier story. And I think it's mostly just because there's a lot more going on and a lot more characters to follow, where it's not just, you know, like the simple, like, you know, like anti-imperialism story and like, like, and a star-crossed romance and all that. It feels like there's a lot more to explore with the characters that are set up here, and also just the world of Pandora and like the grander elements of just like togetherness and accepting diversity, which I think is like the bigger overall theme, because there's a lot going on here, but that's like one of the central things that brings everything together and connects it pretty well within this narrative. So when I say like there's more going on, that there's basically means there's more characters. So there's a lot for everyone to do here, and there's plenty of time to just get lost in the world of Pandora once again. You have Sam Worthington once again playing Jake Sully, who you might remember from the last film. He's now completely become a Na'vi. He permanently had his brain placed into like his Na'vi avatar. And he's basically lived among like the tribes of like the avatars, you know, who are all about the trees. You know, they love like the trees, but there are other tribes that we learn more about as this film goes on. But he's basically conflicted about, you know, what matters most in life, because he settles down with Natiri, once again played by Zoe Saldana, and they have a bunch of children together. Some of them are their own that are born from them. Others are adopted. One of which is like a weird like miracle child of the avatar of Sigourney Weaver's character. So they found a way to get Sigourney Weaver back in this film. And another is a human, simply called Spider, who has grown up on Pandora and could not leave since he was born around the time when like the humans were forced off of Pandora. So he's established a family and realizes that family is more important to him than anything, and realizes that he wants to protect them more than just kind of like fight for his tribe. Because we get like a little bit of like a similar conflict here, like, as once again the humans return to Pandora and they're much more efficient and much more violent. Stephen Lang once more plays a colonel who is after Jake Sully, and you might say to yourself at first, like, wait a minute, hang on, Stephen Lang, didn't his character die in the last Avatar? Pretty much, but yeah, I'll say this: this film tries to find the easy ways to get back into establishing like similar story elements, but also weave back in characters. So even though like Sigourney Weaver and Stephen Lang both died in the last film, they found a way to bring them back. And I love how it's just kind of like it's just simply stated. It's just like okay, here's how they got back. We're just gonna run with these characters again. We're gonna thankfully they explore a little bit more about them that's different. Like I like that Sigourney Weaver is portraying more of like a teenage character who has kind of like an interesting look to her. Like it kind of looks like a younger Sigourney Weaver in her Na'vi form, if that makes any sense. And it was also kind of cool to see like Stephen Lang as, you know, as his he spends the entire film in like his Na'vi avatar. So it was kind of cool to see these characters like in a different light, but also with a much different perspective and drive for the world. So with the humans once more invading, Jake realizes that, okay, you know, like I'm going to endanger the tribe, especially since the Colonel is mostly just after me. Like the Colonel doesn't even care about like occupying Pandora at this point. It's just to get revenge on Jake. And he's willing to go over the heads of just all the other like humans occupying Pandora just so that he can kill Jake. So realizing this, Jake sets off for a water tribe with his family because that's what matters most to him. And if you're familiar with James Cameron, you know that he loves like deep sea life and the oceans and all that and just aquatic life. So there's a very long extended sequence here of just exploring this water tribe of Pandora where like all the Na'vi have evolved to basically be more attuned with the water. Like instead of like just embracing trees, they embrace like the life force of the ocean, and they spend lots of time just underwater, just admiring all the wildlife. And I love that this type of film that is so big and has all these special effects can just take time out to just appreciate like the beauty of it all. Like there are so many dazzling sequences underwater where it's just characters just swimming around, just exploring wildlife, just making new friends. Like at one point they befriend a bunch of whales who have been injured. They get to learn more about them and their tribe and their culture and how they interact with them. And it's just and it's mostly just like them hanging out with it, just hanging out with this new form of like aquatic life, and it's beautiful to look at. And the thing is, like, I'll bring this up. Like, the film, if you're planning to see this film, set aside some time. It runs 3 hours and 10 minutes long. And it is very long. But I feel like that type of length kind of works for this type of film. Because Cameron wants you to get so used to this world that you absorb just, like, the ambiance of it. And it's fun to just get lost within it all, where you're not even like so much concerned about, oh, where's Stephen Lang's character? What are the humans doing? How are they gonna, you know, fight back against this character? And when's the action gonna come? There's a long sequence where it's just admiring this tribe and their daily life and how they interact and the day-to-day problems that they have of trying to like integrate and not feeling like they belong, while also just, you know, coming to terms with themselves and having a bit of introspection while getting in touch with nature. And I was surprised how well this worked, because this was like the first film I think I've seen since like before the pandemic that was in 3D. It was in IMAX 3D at about 60 frames a second, I think it was, that I saw this at. And at first I thought, okay, we're going to go through 3D again. How's this going to work? But then I remembered, okay, you know, it's James Cameron. He's going to make the 3D work. You know, there were a lot of 3D films that followed after Avatar that plain sucked with 3D. But Cameron actually does put a lot of work into it. He knows the type of shots that he wants to have, and he wants to have full control over the 3D, where it works enough where you get engaged. Because like at first, the 60 frames and the 3D aspect hits you immediately when you see the various like floating islands and like the wildlife of Pandora, and like, you know, how those like little bits of like flakes of skin in the air, or like little bugs and stuff that kind of like come into like the foreground, and it gets you used to it. Like at first you're a little bit dazzled, but then like you get used to it, and then just when you think you've gotten used to it, because you're back within like the wooded area of Pandora, you go to like the underwater tribe, and you get to see a whole new aspect of Pandora, and get to just for lack of a better term, just let it wash over you. And it kind of works because I like this. I don't know, there's just something about it where I like this element of just lying back and just letting, just taking in the sights and just admiring, how beautiful they look. And I like that there's not like a whole lot of like extra dialogue to kind of like ruin it. Like a lot of these scenes where it's just showing off like how cool Pandora is, and all this like all this fun sci-fi stuff that's going on, and just like the beauty of it all doesn't have to be acknowledged. Like I feel like in a lesser film there would have to be so many sequences where the characters would have to remark like, oh, it's so beautiful, it's so gorgeous, or this is pretty. It's like, no, Cameron knows that this world is pretty. He knows that it's gorgeous, and he knows that a lot of the audience coming in is going to be amazed just with the incredible world that he's assembled here, that he doesn't need to point it out. It happens, and I guess it helps too that like when the Na'vi are underwater, they can't really talk. Like they can do a little bit of sign language to communicate with each other, but for the most part, it's just them getting starry-eyed. It's just like, getting used to all these new creatures and this different underwater environment, and it's just it's just such a fun, I guess, like not even fun. I guess it's just like I'm trying to find the right words to describe it. Like I don't quite want to say like transcendent or something like that, because I feel like that almost might be a little bit pretentious. But it's just it's such a beautiful sight. I guess that's the best way to describe it. Yeah, it's beautiful to look at, and Cameron lets you linger enough on all the details to just like know and love this world, and just become absorbed within it all. That being said, that's not saying like there's no conflict. Like this isn't like some like it's not like an avant-garde experience. There is some conflict. There is some action. You will get to see some new mech suits from the humans. You will get to see the many Na'vi characters engage in combat with like arrows, and they have internal conflicts, or they punch each other. All that stuff is there. But the build up to it is like my favorite aspect. Cause like by the time we get to the fourth act, or I guess, depending on how you look at it, like the fifth act, depending on how you read the runtime. But I guess when you get to the fourth act, like the action, like it's not bad. It's still fun. It delivers on all the stuff you expect from James Cameron when it comes to like action films, especially with his use of like water and these, and I'm trying to find like the right words, but like seaplanes, I guess is the right word. Like they're almost like sea carriers, I guess. But he uses them well in like this great like kind of sequence where like the ship is capsizing, and there's explosions and gunfire, and there's boats swarming all around, and Na'vi are like shooting arrows, and the humans are like shooting back at them. All like the fun action stuff. But and while I do like that sequence, especially with how like it ends with bringing all the characters together and finding like the core of the film, the heart that leads up to that is what I love most about the film. Especially with like the way that you get to know all the different characters, like all the kids within Jake Sully's family. You get to see like the older brother who ends up taking too much responsibility. You get to see the younger brother who is who's committed to like proving himself and going against orders, and has to learn the hard way that you got to work together with everyone. You have Sigourney Weaver's character, who I found her character very fascinating, because they established that she has some secretive power that she can better tap into wildlife and kind of like control the fish of the sea when she like taps into kind of like like kind of like the tree spirit, but it's kind of like coral, I guess. Basically she can tap into like the natural forces of Pandora, and it's pretty cool to see that. But I also admired the fact that they kind of acknowledge that she has epilepsy, and that she's worried that like that she won't be able to like to do as much. So I kind of found it interesting because like Spider also has a similar problem of like feeling like he won't be accepted by the Na'vi. Jake also has the problem of like being a Na'vi who has, you know, 5 fingers instead of like the 4 I think that the Na'vi usually have. So there's always this concern about acceptance and inclusion, for being different and having these differences in you. And I thought it was kind of neat how it kind of worked it into the story. It's not like the greater drive of it by like, you know, like it's not fully acknowledged like, you know, oh, like you do have some worth to society, despite these differences that we have. Like they kind of acknowledge it, but not in the way where it's like, okay, if you go too far down this route, you're going to get into a little bit of dark territory where like, you know, you have to prove yourself in order to be valid, which I'm kind of glad they didn't do. I like the fact that this type of story about diversity is fairly light, where it gives the characters enough to do and enough to explore, where you're kind of fascinated to see how they will grow within this tribe and how they kind of learn to live among the different aspects of Pandora. In terms of like villains, though, like they really make the humans kind of like very easy to hate. Like Stephen Lang leads an entire team of human Na'vi avatars who are all just jerks, just mercenaries who chew bubblegum, who are aggressive, who lift weights, who wear Viper sunglasses. And they team up with a group of poachers who poach like the nectar from inside like these whale creatures that they basically just want to sell. So they're just greedy poachers, and they're just scummy people who you know are going to die at some point. And thankfully, the lead poacher has probably one of the funniest deaths that involves an amputation. Just enough of an amputation that you could get away with in a PG-13 film. That works really well here, where it's kind of like, okay, that's darkly comedic, kind of how it was staged, where you didn't expect that kind of death. Like there's a lot of death going on, but you didn't expect that to happen. But maybe you might. I mean, it's James Cameron, the guy who gave us like the propeller guy in Titanic. So I guess you kind of got to expect that. So it's more or less, I guess, what you've come to expect from Cameron. Because like a lot of people were kind of just coming to this film like feeling like, oh, I don't know, are we willing to come back to Avatar again? And a lot of people are kind of remembering, oh yeah, when Cameron first started with Avatar, a lot of people were hesitant, and they came in, they saw the film, and they were kind of wowed by it. Over time, that opinion's kind of changed, especially since when you focus on the narrative, it's very much a bare bones narrative, like, you know, about like Dances with Wolves. And I'm sure, and I have no doubt that probably over time, this narrative will be seen as a little bit more simple in terms of just, you know, trying to juggle these somewhat simple themes of like diversity into giving just enough of the ensemble cast enough to do. But in terms of like the way it's set up for this film, I feel like the script is a little bit better just because I feel like there's enough going on. On that same level, though, I almost kind of feel like I would have liked to spend a little bit more time with the characters, which I know that's a huge ask for a film that's well over 3 hours long. But I felt like Natiri was kind of bookended in this film. It felt like her only worth was in like the first act, and then she only gets to like prove herself and kind of like show more of her maternal instincts in the fourth act. Which, don't get me wrong, it's cool to see what she does in the fourth act, but she mostly just takes a backseat to the kids and a little bit to like Jake. Jake is a little bit more in the background within the middle section of this film, which I kind of understand because there's a lot more interesting stuff going on with the kids. It's much more fascinating to see like kind of like the new generation that kind of grows up, dealing with a much more diverse family that's, you know, especially a family that has like adopted children into it and feeling like they are different and feeling like they don't belong, and learning that, you know, if they band together as a family, you know, that togetherness will save them. Which, as hokey and, you know, saccharine as that might sound, it kind of works for this narrative, which mostly just wants to lavish in this CGI world, which, you know, for all the allure that you know, a lot of people will probably just scoff at it for the fact that it's all CGI for like 90% of the film. I gotta admit, for throwing us into this world of Pandora, it's it's still dazzling to come back to. It's still the sight. Because I know that a lot of people just say, oh, it's just a bunch of CGI that's like neat to look at, but it's like, yeah, that's what it is. Like, that's what most James Cameron films are. It's fun stuff to look at up on the screen. Like, you know, going back to all of them with, like, you know, with Terminator 2 and Titanic and True Lies, like, they're all just big, huge blockbusters. That's just amazing to see that the world that he assembles, the action that it has, and a little bit of the charm that he assembles within the characters. And most of the stories are light, pretty much. But I will say that, yeah, like, there's more going on within the script where I feel it works, and it's just amazing just to see all the underwater sequences, and everything about Pandora is just dazzling. That there's rarely a boring moment. There's moments where I kind of, especially towards like the fourth act, it's like, okay, I see where this is going with like the battle and the action. This is cool, but you kind of question like how long this is going to go on, because I had a lot more fun with just characters just lingering and having fun and just exploring the ocean than I did with like the Na'vi tackling mech suits and these like giant crab robot creatures more than anything else. Like, especially, there's a great moment where Sigourney Weaver's character is just trying to get in touch with Pandora, and it's just lying down in the shallow part of the beach, just admiring like the caustic lights of the that are reflected in the sand. And it's just it feels like such like a nothing moment, but the fact that you get to linger on it and just admire like the beauty of how it's assembled, and just take a time out before like all the explosions and the action, all the chaos will swarm in on the fourth act. Just have like these little moments of breaks and just admiring the majesty of it all. So on that level, Avatar: The Way of Water, it really does work, because most people are just going to be coming to this film for the experience, to see how cool it looks on the big screen and in like IMAX and 3D with the 60 frames per second, and with all that combined together, it's still a cool experience. It's still good. It's still good. So Avatar: The Way of Water is currently playing in theaters right now. Its official release is tomorrow, but of course we get Thursday previews, so there's probably a bunch of people I was going to say a bunch of people are probably going to getting out of the screening now, but it's like it's 3 hours and 10 minutes long, so I think like the earliest screenings are like 5 or 6, so we're probably going to wait like another 2 hours to hear everyone's reactions as they swarm on social media. So yeah, it's a fun film. I kind of like it a little bit more than the first Avatar film, just because there's more going on, there's more to explore, and it's still beautiful, you know. I dare say like the visuals are much better than the first film as well. So like for the spectacle alone, it's worth checking out. Yeah, just keep an eye on the time. You know, 3 hours and 10 minutes. So you know, a lot of people, if you're getting your babysitters ready, you know, be aware. Okay, what do we got next on the docket? Oh, we got switching things up here. Covered an action horror film, we covered an atmospheric sci-fi epic, and now we're going to cover a little bit of a period romance drama with Empire of Light. Let me get my notes up here. I wish that I could probably get away with it if I wanted to, but like I wish that I could show the trailers before we start talking about these films. But I know that like the copyright will just shoot it down. Even though, I mean, I have a press account. I should have access to like show these trailers, but whatever. I'm sure there's like a process that I have to go through, but that's too much. All right. Let me get the notes up here. Let me make sure I got everything here. This film, I believe, is playing in limited release right now, but I don't think it's going to be expanding till Christmas, so just be aware of that. Okay, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. So Empire of Light is the new film by Sam Mendes. And you might remember that the last film that Sam Mendes did was 1917. The film from 2019, the World War I epic, that was notable for having like basically the long continuous shot through the battlefield. There was lots of action and intensity within that film. So for his follow-up film to be Empire of Light, it's I'll be honest, not as much action. You're gonna get a little bit of of whiplash here, because instead of going for like the big bold action extravaganza, here it's much smaller, simpler, and much more emotionally engaging film than 1917. And that's not a slander against Empire of Light. I'm just telling you what your expectations should be here. So you have Olivia Colman playing Hilary Small, and she works at the Empire Theatre in early 1980s the UK. And she lives a quiet life, you know. That she works at the theater, she manages the floor, she takes tickets, you know, she invites people in, she greets them as they exit the building, and she lives a fairly quiet life, you know. The film opens with her just you know, managing a screening on Christmas Day, and it goes by pretty uneventfully. Nothing really happens all that much. She goes home, she has a very quiet dinner, very quiet Christmas, and then New Year's rolls around. But the closer that it gets to New Year's, she has a new hire. Michael Stephen, who's played by Michael Ward, is the newest hire, a young black man who is excited to be working in a movie theater. And so Hilary shows him the ins and outs of the theater, and eventually she's coerced into showing Stephen the upper part of the theater. Basically, the part of the theater that was abandoned. Like, it was a 4-screen cinema, and they only have 2 screens now. But upstairs, like, there's a bit of an abandoned area where there used to be a lounge and everything. And they go up there, and, you know, Stephen's amazed by it, and Hilary is also like, yes, this is a place where I like to get away, and, like, you know, there's a few pigeons here and there, and there's not really windows, but it's still just like a wonderful place just to get away and just have a little bit of, you know, solitude. And there's like this loving nature to it where you know, you feel like Hilary is inviting Stephen into her world, and they get to know each other more. Like, they bond over like fixing the wing of a pigeon. So a romance slowly blooms between them. And like, yeah, there's a little bit of like an age disparity romance here. But it, like, you know, Hilary feels like a little bit odd, like, being in this relationship, because she feels like it wouldn't really work, especially since she doesn't feel like she can be in a relationship with anyone with her past trauma. They establish kind of like a little bit subtly in the beginning that she has had trauma in the past, and she has trouble dealing with people, and also that she's being taken advantage of by others. In particular, her boss, played by Colin Firth, coerces her to come into his office every now and then to have sex with him. Well, either have sex with him or, you know, pleasure him, you know. So Hilary is kind of conflicted about getting into this relationship with Stephen, because she doesn't feel like it's something that would work, or something that she feels like she wants to pursue. So there's this very conflicted, like, will they, won't they romance here, especially since Stephen is a little bit like, he's not sure he wants to get into this relationship as well. While this is all going down, like, there's a bunch of changes going on with the theater. Like, they're getting a big new movie that's going to come in. There's changes in management, and basically Stephen also has bigger dreams for the future. Like, he wants to be an architect, and he wants to go to school and college to study for it, but he hasn't been accepted yet. So he's just kind of like working at the theater for a little while. And it's an aspect that Hilary is kind of struggling to grapple with, because she realizes that, oh, Stephen might not be here forever. So what exactly will our relationship be, and can I continue on without him? And it's kind of like, it's a very like sweet and sad question, because you really do feel for Hilary. There's a lot of great scenes in this film. Like, a lot of them are, some are like darkly comedic, especially like a scene where Hilary confronts Colin Firth's character and reveals to his wife their affair, and basically reveals it in a kind of like Shakespearean way, but using vulgarity within her dialogue, which is so great. Like it's it's shocking, but at the same time, like it's hilarious how she chooses to make this grand reveal. Other times there are darker moments, like when there's a very charming scene where Hillary and Steven are at the beach and they're connecting with each other. They're just talking with each other while they're making a sandcastle, and Steven kind of trips over into like triggering an aspect of Hillary's past by asking about past relationships, and she just goes off like immediately, and it becomes like just so deeply sad to see her like that. But one of the major scenes that I found myself actually fascinated with is there's a great moment where Hillary is at her lowest. She's in her apartment. She feels like she can't come into work, that she can't face the world, that she's having mental problems. And Steven comes to comfort her. And I love the fact that Hillary bites back. She's like, look, I'll bounce back. I'm sure I will. But I got some crap to deal with. And I just want to hang out and drink. So if you want to chill with me and drink too, that's fine. But I'm not begging for your help. And I love that the fact that like she has like a mental disorder, but she has like an awareness and an agency to it, where she's willing to bite back, and she kind of like knows the process of what's going to happen when she becomes more of like an upstart, and like institutions take note of her. She's very much kind of aware of that process, where even though she is crumbling, she is somewhat aware of herself and also how others treat her. So like there's a moment where you feel like Steven is struggling to kind of like show empathy, and he's tripping all over himself. Like he can't quite show the empathy, and it comes off as pity, and Hillary just bites back. And it is so satisfying to have that moment in a movie where someone with a mental disorder is not someone who's just there to be pitied, but like someone who is dealing with some rough stuff and just needs and doesn't need someone exactly to help, but someone to be there and someone to listen to them, which I found was such a cool aspect to have in this film. At the same time, Steven's character is also fascinating for being someone who's aware of like the racial tensions of that era. And even though he's a nice guy, like if he's pushed just a little bit too far, he'll want to like bite back just as much. Except he doesn't do it as much because he's aware of what's going to happen. Like he knows that if he fights back too much, he's going to get into a fight. And with how many racists there were running around the UK at the time, it felt like it was a dangerous time. Like, and there's a moment where it's just like he's overwhelmed with rage and fury and just gets the crap kicked out of him. And it's shocking, especially like when it comes after such like a beautiful moment of like togetherness in the theater. It erupts into violence once there are like rioters in the streets that come in and assault him on the basis of racism. And I love how the aftermath of that scene is basically Hillary trying to find a way to comfort Steven in the hospital while not, going into areas where she feels like she shouldn't, especially since she runs into like Steven's mother while they're in the hospital and realize that, this is not going to look good if Steven's mom thinks that we're in a relationship. So kind of got to tread lightly. And it's one of those things that like you feel like Hillary can't avoid, and it does eventually come out. But it's one of those like awkward situations where you feel like people are trying to tread lightly just because they love each other so much. Now for a film that's being set at a movie theater in the 1980s, there is definitely a little bit of like a love letter to the cinema here, especially when there's a scene where you get the shot, if you know what I mean. Like a lot of people refer to this like there's like, how like in The Fabelmans it opens with like the Steven Spielberg type character going into the movies for the first time and looking up at the screen and the light comes on his face and he's just amazed and overwhelmed by movies. You get that same shot within Empire of Light. Like, they established that Hillary hasn't watched much movies in the theater, and she doesn't really watch anything at the Empire Cinema. But then she eventually realized that, maybe I should give it a try, and she ends up watching Being There, the Peter Sellers movie, in the theater all by herself, just sitting there alone, gazing up at the screen, and the big grin comes on her face, and like that's like the key moment you want to have. Is like the love letter to cinema. The good news is that unlike other films that would kind of just languish on or that would just kind of like linger on the cinema aspect, the aspect of the theater and what movies mean to people is treated more as kind of like an emotional, I'm trying to find the right words, but like a peppering more than like the central theme, because it's ultimately not like movies that bring Hillary and Steven together, but it is like one aspect that does make them connect a little bit more. Like, cause Steven brings up how he really likes movies and like says that Hillary should check out some, and eventually Hillary does, and she realizes the magic of it. And you also get a very emotional moment where you have Toby Jones playing the projectionist, and Toby Jones speaks with Steven and shows him like how the projectors work, and like the ins and outs of what makes the what brings like the film strips to life. And also divulges a little bit of like the philosophy on how it's light that brings out the life within these film strips and takes away like the darkness in between. So a little bit metaphorical, that they a little bit more obvious, I guess, with the metaphor there. But it does play well into the fact that like there is like troubled times and you're going to face some darkness in your life, but that there's always a little bit of light somewhere in there. And the film is all about just finding those little moments of emotional like care and depth that make life worth living. Like, life is tough. There's always going to be problems and challenges. And Empire of Light doesn't want to shy away from like the issues that come with mental disorders and and racism that happens within the era, but also trying to find little moments of like victory here and there and the brighter side, and basically just trying to find any reason you can to just keep on going and just keep on living and establish like great bonds. Like, I love the fact that, like, I mentioned a few of the characters, like like Toby Jones, Michael Ward, and Colin Firth, but I like the fact that all the employees there, with the exception of Colin Firth's character, obviously, they all have some emotional depth to them that makes you care and love for them. Like, at first, I thought Toby Jones is just kind of going to be like the curmudgeon-y projectionist, because like he spends the entire film just talking about the projector, just does nothing but that. Like, even in the break room with small talk, all he's talking, like, he's just talking about like, oh well, if you smoke cigarettes you're gonna ruin the projector, so I'm trying to like get like a ban on cigarettes within like the theater. But later on you actually learn that, oh, actually like this character actually has something that he's been running from. Like, he has family that he hasn't visited, and he just can't bring himself to be with them. But he ends up finding a bit of a new family with people like Hillary and Steven. And you get to know a few other characters. Like, there's an eccentric guy with glasses there who has such like a chipper and fun attitude, but he's also very smart and aware of what's going on with like the internal politics of the theater. And you just get to know and like these people, that it's just sweet to just hang out with them for a bit and just learn what their problems are and what their little joys are, and how they celebrate the New Year's, and how they will celebrate a big film coming to their theater, and just trying to make life a little bit brighter. And as corny as that sounds, it works for this type of film. Like, this is definitely not going to be everyone's type of film, because I feel like it puts a little bit too much of like the rose-colored glasses on there for how it portrays like the cinema, and how it almost kind of approaches this like material that seems like it would be very vicious, with almost kind of like very gentle gloves for this type of story. At the same time, however, in terms of being like a romantic drama set in the 1980s, that is somewhat aware of the conflicts of the era, it works well. And I think it's mostly just because of the chemistry between Olivia Colman and Michael Ward, just because they're such lovable characters in this film, and you just want the best for them, that you're rooting through them throughout the entire film with every little step they take towards bettering themselves. And it ultimately leaves you just feeling good by the end of the film. Like I love the fact that how Hillary is like, she has an obsession with poetry, but it's not like it's kind of integrated the same way that like that movies are integrated, where it's not like the thing of the film. Like you don't get to see a lot of Hillary's poetry, but when you get to see her like read off something powerful by the end of the film, you feel like it actually has like a lot of greater meaning and a contemplation of our time on this earth, and just being a good person and just finding people to like just hang out with. Because some of like the greatest moments in this film are just when characters are hanging out and having a drink and just having small talk in the break room. Just I almost kind of wish like this film were a little bit longer. It comes in at like just under 2 hours, and it's one of those films where it's like it breezes by so quickly. Like it's edited so fast that it kind of like zooms from one patch of time to the next almost seamlessly, that you're just kind of like, wait, hang on, I want to spend some more time with these characters. I kind of love them. I want to see what other fun quirks they have, especially since there's this kind of like 80s punk girl working there who I feel like we didn't get to know enough about her. I want to know what it feels like. We get to know enough about every other character. I want to know more about her. I want to hang out with everyone at this theater just because they're all such wonderful and lovable characters. But for the time that we do get to spend with all of them in Empire of Light, it's such a delightful film, and it makes you feel good by the end. Such a wonderful film. So Empire of Light is in limited release right now, so you can probably find it in like maybe like a few AMCs and like your art house theaters. It will definitely be there, but it should be expanding everywhere on. I think it's expanding everywhere next weekend. Like I was gonna say Christmas, but like I guess yeah, Christmas weekend. So let's see. Let's see. It's not actually coming to the UK until till January. I thought it'd be out sooner. Okay, so let's see. December 9th. It's in limited release right now. But I believe I know for sure it's got to be expanding by next weekend. If it's not already, is it? Oh no, wait, actually, yeah, I think it actually is expanding this weekend, because I'm seeing many more theaters for it. So yeah, if you feel like checking out Empire of Light, if you get burnt out on action-packed stuff like Violent Night and and Avatar 2, and you don't want to take all that in the 3 hours and 10 minutes, yeah, give Empire of Light a try. So it's a fun little diversion. Listen, I shouldn't say fun. It's very sad, but very charming film. Nice little break film, you know. All right, so for the next batch of films, let's see. So we've covered a little bit of everything. We've covered Violent Night for action. We've covered Avatar: The Way of Water for sci-fi. We've covered Empire of Light for drama. Now, let's talk some documentaries. Because I recently caught up with a few, and there's a few that are worth noting that I want to talk about. So first off, probably one of like the top documentaries of the year, Fire of Love. Let me get up my notes here. Let's see. Okay. All right. And 3, 2, 1. So, Fire of Love. Sounds like it would be a romantic comedy or romantic drama type film. But no, this is actually a documentary. Well, it's a documentary that's kind of about a romance. It's about these two volcanologists called Katya and Maurice Croft, and they basically fell in love with volcanoes. You know, they hook up, they become a couple, and they're brought together with their love of the volcanic. And unfortunately, for those who know the story of them, they died doing what they love. While they were investigating, a volcanic eruption, they were swept away and both killed in their work. And the film kind of admits this right away. Like, basically, it's very upfront that the film you're going to watch is about two people who died doing what they love. But you get to learn all about how they came to be, what they love about it. And this film tries to be... I love the spirit of this film by trying to be all-encompassing, of trying to figure out everything about this married couple and try to track down every little bit of footage that they can find of them and every speck of information to get a complete picture of this volcanologist couple. And director Sarah Dosa does an amazing job trying to assemble this. Like, she uses animations to fill in like the blanks just enough, and it feels like subtle enough with like kind of like cutout animation where it's not too imposing. She uses old footage, old photos, and she puts it all in the 4:3 aspect ratio. So there's never a moment where we're kind of like taken out of it. We're always, locked in within like this type of story and looking at all this archival footage of them. And we get to learn more, not just about like their work and the volcanoes that they observed, but also Katya and Maurice as characters. Because we learn that like Katya is more obsessed with like the details of how volcanoes affect the earth. Like, she's fascinated by wildlife and like, the little, how rocks change and like just little aspects to consider, while they establish Maurice as someone who's more interested in the bigger aspects of the world. How does like the volcano affect the rest of the earth on a grander scale? And they combine forces to film, they basically kind of go like the Jacques Cousteau route of just filming anything they can with volcanoes and exploring and learning more about them. And it's fascinating, like, because like in the same way that this is, I watched this through like National Geographic, and although I think it's through like Neon, who's the distributor. Anyway, National Geographic, I believe it was last year, they also did a film on on Jacques Cousteau, that highlighted his drive for making nature documentaries that meant something and had an impact on the world. And that's very much what Katya and Maurice are trying to do with their work. You can tell that they do care a lot about the world, but are kind of disillusioned by it as well. They established fairly early on that they were heavily involved with political activism. But when they realized that they weren't getting that far with it and that some of the activism wasn't working, they decided to turn their gaze towards volcanoes as a mysterious force where they feel like it's something that they have control over and something bigger than themselves that they can explore. And by that same token, the research they do actually ends up being crucial in saving lives. Like, at one point, I believe there's a volcano that erupts where it's in the direct path of causing mudslides to many villages with thousands of people living there. And all the information is assembled about what's going to happen, that the mudslides, it's going to happen, and these villages are going to be affected, and that you've got to evacuate them. And the people in charge basically looked at this and said, that's too much money. We're not going to do that. So we're just going to tough it out. And as a result, well over 10,000 people died because of that. And it's just infuriating. And, just to watch like Katya come to like where the disaster is and observe the mudslides and how so much life was lost just because of ignorance, of like key information that was provided on the environment. It's angering, but it's also sobering about how important their work was, because later on, this would be learned from after documenting all this. And now when there are volcanic eruptions and they can speculate when they're happening, they're taken a lot more seriously in other countries. Like, they'll evacuate people and save many lives now. The film bounces between like the exploration of exploring volcanoes and the media perceptions of Maurice and Katya. that it creates this kind of like complete picture that's more interesting from the perspective of the scientists more than just their work in volcano activity, which I think makes the film much more interesting because like it, it it's kind of between like like a biography and an exploration on like scientific research on volcanoes. And if I had to choose between whichever one it's closer to, it's definitely on the side of like a biographical film about this, these two scientists and their life's work. Similar to the Jacques Cousteau documentary, Becoming Cousteau. It's very much on that same wavelength of painting a complete picture of these people who are trailblazers in their particular sciences. So in the same way that like Jacques Cousteau expanded our knowledge and general media perceptions of underwater life, the Croft family. I say family, but it's the couple. Maurice and Katya, their work with volcanoes and what they filmed were essential to learning more about our world and just make them such important people that I feel like this documentary is just like the perfect kind of love letter to their work and what they did, while also trying to like find a little bit of like the absurdity and a bit of a grander perspective of how their media appearances are portrayed and how they interacted with the camera and and how their work has been perceived. So you get a much grander aspect than just looking at archival footage and getting the bare bones of it. Like I especially love like the narration here by Miranda July, and the way that it's written too. It does criticize them a bit for, like at one point they show some archival footage that that the director is clearly questioning, like, okay, why is this here? Well, why did they film this, and how did they film this, and why were there different takes of this? And rather than just kind of just going like, what's this? They set it up where it's like, okay, what importance is this shot going to have, and like, and basically kind of trying to find like the right way to like dice up the footage and try to paint this portrait and biography of these two expert volcanologists who sadly died in Japan in just an incredible explosion. That's just like it's astounding and sad at the same time to watch what happened. Like especially when you see that you see like the last bit of footage of them, but you also see footage of like a cameraman who abandoned his camera right as like the giant clouds of ash and fire were like coming towards them, which is just hauntingly horrific. To imagine that this couple went into like these dangerous territory and barely thought anything of. They're just kind of like, okay, well, you plan it as best you can, and you just go with it. Like at one point they're like, oh, it's no different from just walking down the street. You plan for the worst. You look for where the lava's going, and it's just like, I could not do what these people are doing. And you're just impressed with just their determination and their love that just kept them going and just exploring more and understanding everything there is about the world and volcanoes, which continued to be unpredictable and just full of surprises that it's just fascinating to just be along with them on this journey for how like short a time that they were on this planet. You get the feeling like if that volcano didn't consume them, they would still be doing as much work as they could. So yeah, it's such like a wonderful portrait, and also has like this great energy, and I love the way that it's edited and how like the animation is used. That this is easily one of my favorite documentaries of the year. So Fire of Love from National Geographic. It's through Neon. Trying to think where it would be. I think it's on Disney Plus. I think it is right now, because like this came out like mid-year. I'm just getting back to it now. So, alrighty. Well, what do we have next? Another documentary. Knocking them all out today. All right. I'm gonna try to keep my voice up for this. Okay. Okay. Let's do Goodnight Oppie. In 3, 2, 1. So, Goodnight Oppie is the inspiring story of a rover. A space rover by the name of Opportunity was sent off to Mars in 2003, and they thought it was just only going to last about 90 days. Like, they wanted to explore the surface of Mars and document as much as they could, and they projected that the rover, along with the other rover Spirit, which was on like a different part of the planet, would only last for about 90 days. Well, 90 days soon turned into a year, and then another year, and another year, and another year. And for just about 15 years, the Opportunity rover just explored all of Mars. Well, not quite all of Mars, but it got a ton of information and just explored a lot of the area and made some fascinating discoveries. And so, Opportunity is finally given its little documentary film all about the character. the little robot that could, or little rover that could, I guess. So I love the way that the film is set up, where it bounces between observing Opportunity and also telling the story of those involved with manning the rover and this mission. We get to learn a little bit about the scientists and what went into basically cutting the red tape of trying to get this mission approved, assembling the rovers, how that happened, and and the liftoff, and basically just the scientists having like their fingers crossed at every moment, just like, oh, please don't screw up, please don't blow up in the sky, please don't let the radiation from the sun affect the rovers, please have a decent landing where we can establish contact. And every time they do, you're on pins and needles, and then once they actually get like a signal that everything's good, everything's fine, relief and cheers just wash over them at every point. And it sounds like with and it might sound like when I say that, like, they discuss like the red tape of trying to like get this project going, that this would kind of be a very tactile and kind of like boring documentary with addressing it, but it actually proceeds rather smoothly. Like, it covers like the key points, while at the same time getting to know just enough about the NASA scientists working on this mission. Like, you get to learn a little bit of their history, how they got interested in science, where they were during this mission, and how their lives change. But at the same time, they're mostly just there to paint a picture of the Opportunity rover. And to make that picture more complete, there's special effects here that are provided, I believe they're provided by ILM, to try to recreate what it was like for the rover on Mars. So you essentially have this recreation of these cute little rovers running around Mars, and having Opportunity being kind of having a bit of narration by Angela Bassett to kind of give it this kind of like, smooth, very like, calming voice to let to make you feel like Opportunity is going to reveal all and everything's going to be okay, with Opportunity. And just like, I think it's great to have like those animation sequences, because when you see what the actual, what the scientists were looking at with like the photos and the footage that was coming back, like there wasn't a whole lot there. So to have this animation present, it makes it a lot more exciting, especially for portraying sequences like when, like during the launch, when they were afraid that like a solar flare was gonna knock out the rovers before they even got to Mars, and just watching it just like hit it, it feels like, an exciting and dangerous moment where you're just as fearful as the scientist, like, oh god, is this gonna work? Is this gonna work? And there's many moments, like even once the rover lands on Mars, there are so many moments where like, can it make it out of this ditch? Can it go this far? And there's so many like great surprises along the way that it's such an inspiring story. Like at one point, they fear that these dust clouds are gonna be like the end all of this mission. Like, it feels like once the rover gets hit by them, like that's it. It's just gonna knock out everything, and they're done for. But surprisingly, it turns out the dust storms actually cleaned off the solar panels and made it so the rover could keep doing its job. And it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. And I love the fact that they also try to establish a little bit of the tone and the camaraderie that went on with the scientists during this project. One of the great little bits they have is that they had a wake up music ceremony. So every morning when they were trying to like wake up the crew and bring up some spirits and hopes, they would play a very meaningful song over their speakers to kind of just wake everyone up, but also like cheer them up. And they always found like just the right song choice. Like at one point they fail to establish contact with Opportunity, and they keep trying and trying and trying, hoping and hoping that it'll work. And then for like one of their mornings they end up playing ABBA's SOS, and everyone who feels down just kind of like perks up a little bit, like, oh, okay, that's a fitting song, that's kind of what we're doing here. And it continues on throughout where they're just they keep that tradition alive while also like trying to trying to make the best of like situations where there's a lot of waiting. Like they address the fact that anything you do with the rovers, it takes a long time for them to take in that information and then implement it on Mars. So there's lots of waiting, and there's lots of like just being on the edge of your seat waiting for like the rover to send something back, send something meaningful. Like is there signs of life within the rocks or like the water that they found on Mars? Like what when are we going to get that information? And just the fact that this occurred for nearly 15 years, it's just like you got to imagine like how stressful it is, where those days where just like, oh, did we hear anything back from the rovers? No. When is it going to happen? And you're just like you want to hear it. So I think it's kind of fun to just have it all like condensed within like this 100-minute film that kind of documents like the entire journey and all like the excitement and the anxieties and the joys and the celebrations that come with this space exploration. And then just having like, and then of course you get to see the photos that come back, and they're stunning and they're gorgeous, and it's enough to get you just like, and of course like this feels like very much like a little bit of like a NASA recruitment video where they're just trying to say, it's like, yes, look at all the cool stuff NASA can do, but at the same time it's like they actually do some cool stuff, and it is fun to see this adventure of this rover and all the important work it's done in discovering more about Mars and revealing more about our galaxy bit by bit, with all these people who commit years of their life to this project, and they yield like these fascinating results. So it's just such a fun and exciting documentary that really does get you interested in the sciences of exploring more of our galaxy and Mars, and understanding a little bit of like the tech that goes into making that exploration possible. And also the Opportunity, at least the way that they portray it in this film with like the animation, the Opportunity rover is just cute. It's any time that animation is up on the screen, like they're not even like trying to like exaggerate it to make it have like kind of like this Wall-E quality to it. It's mostly just them trying to replicate the exact design and the movements and how it would feel like to be on Mars, and it just ends up being cute. And even like the scientists admit, like, yeah, like the Opportunity robot where it had like like the cameras, like they were kind of like big eyes, like, yeah, they're cute. So yeah, it's a documentary that's as informative and fascinating as it is adorable. So Goodnight Oppie is currently playing on Amazon Prime. Hi, Public Piper. I just saw you there. Yes, you can. If you'd like to bring up another film, you can. It's open forum-ish, I guess. Why did I say open forum? I guess the chat's open if you want to recommend anything. So yeah, we're just running through the reviews here. Sorry if I didn't see your comment in time there. All right. So, trying to think if I have it in me for one more film. I think I might. I might have to make this one light, but I feel like I should definitely address this one. Okay, let me get my notes up here. Because this is definitely going to be, like, I've been talking a lot about, like, the for-your consideration films that I've been watching. Like, what do we got here? We got Women Talking and 13 Lives, another Amazon film. And I am going to talk about, like next week, I will definitely talk about Women Talking. I have seen it all. I just want to time it so that it's closer to release date. Because I'm pretty sure this is only, like, Women Talking is only going to be in limited release around Christmas, and then it's going to expand into January. So kind of want to time it so people can see it. But Emmett, the Till movie, has been out for quite a bit, so I'm limiting it. Okay, so let's see. Let me get my notes up here, and 3, 2, 1. So Till is the tragic story of Emmett Till, the teenager who was killed tragically because basically just because of lack of racism of the era. Wait, shoot. Oh my god. Hang on. Shoot. I lost my notes here. God. Why did... This is what you get for keeping your notes in Chrome, you know? Crashes every now and then, you know? Okay. There it is. Okay. Back to it. All right. 3, 2, 1. So Till is the tragic story of Emmett Till, the teenager who was killed in Mississippi, and the struggles that his mother went through to make his death mean something. Now, when you're dealing with this type of film, there's a few ways that you could approach it. You could just focus on the aftermath and kind of make a meal out of that, or you could just center on the moments that lead up to Emmett Till's death, and that could be its own film. And thankfully, like, Till tries to be both those movies. It reserves its first half for just getting to know Emmett, liking him, loving him, realizing that he was just a kid with big dreams and ambitions who didn't quite understand the racist tendencies of the South, and as a result, ended up being the target of racism. And then the second act is not quite, like, I don't quite want to say it like it's a courtroom drama, even though there is a lot of courtroom drama in the second half. But the second half is mostly just the aftermath and the struggle of sorry, I misgripped her name, but his mother, played by Danielle Deadwyler. Am I saying that right? Deadwyler, who delivers a fantastic performance. And I loved her performance because, like, it feels there's a lot of scenes that require a lot of, like, fear and sadness and power that like some actors might have just, like, went on autopilot through. And thankfully, Danielle doesn't do that with her performance. Like, she throws everything she has. Like, one of the most crucial moments that could make or break the film is the scene where she witnesses her son's coffin coming off the train. And once she sees that box, she breaks down. She crumbles, she melts, she cries, she cries out to the Lord for, to spare her son. She begs them to let him out of the box, that he can't breathe, and she's crying and praying that, some miracle will bring her boy back to her. And this feels like a fairly standard scene that you could kind of just walk through with just, like, simple tears. But thankfully, Danielle, she launches herself into this scene. She becomes a blubbering mess while saying these lines, and it feels perfectly placed for that. At the same time, I was trying to remember her name. It was Mammy Till. Sorry. But at the same time, Mrs. Till recognizes the fact that, I can't just, like, let this go. Like, I want the world to know that this was a boy who, he had big dreams and he didn't deserve what happened to him. So she doesn't try to hide the grotesqueness of what was done to her child. So she makes the controversial call of deciding that, I'm going to bring in a photographer who's going to photograph my son's, brutalized body, and we're going to publish it. And we don't, and she realized like she has a stern tone where she's like, I don't care what the press and what people are going to say. Everyone needs to see this. Everyone needs to see the seriousness of the situation. And then, of course, we get, like, like the blowback of people saying, like, oh, that's in poor taste. Like, she's, like, this is not how you respect the dead and stuff like that. And then you get, like, conspiratorial stuff like, oh, I don't think Emmett Till is dead at all. I think it was all just staged. And it's kind of depressing when you realize, like, how little has changed with this type of news when someone is murdered like this. And for those who are familiar with like the story of what goes down here, you sense what's coming, but you're mostly just watching to see how it unfolds with like the actors present here. And while I feel like everyone does like a fairly good performance here, like you even have like Whoopi Goldberg in the role of Mrs. Till's mother, who kind of gives a very subtle and understated performance. An entire cast here that mostly works pretty well. This is ultimately Danielle's film. She owns this role, she dominates it, and she has great power where you can feel her frustrations and you're rooting for her even when she feels like the despair. Like, one of the best moments is when she's in the courtroom and she's hearing the white woman's testimony, who claims that Emmett assaulted her, which is not what happened. And she basically just gets up, she leaves the courtroom, and she says, I'm not going back in there because I already know what the verdict is going to be. I can read the room. I know what's happening. I can see what's going to be going on here. So she doesn't win the case, but, she pushes forward, people realizing that, like, this is disgusting. This type of, racism and lynching can't be going on within our community. And it's really sad when you realize, how, because like by the time you get to the end of the film, we get the the standard epilogue credits that inform you about what happened with the characters after that and how racism and lynching have altered since then. But it's also meant to be like angering too, because when you realize that the anti-lynching bill based on what happened to Emmett Till didn't get approved until very, very recently. Like, I believe, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was like this year that it finally got approved. So more than like 60 years, I think, yeah, roughly about like 60 years after Emmett's death. I guess, yeah, that's well over like 60 years. Yeah, it's just, it's maddening to see like how slow progress is, but also on another level, it's like, yeah, it's angering that it would take this long to like recognize that, oh yeah, lynching is bad actually. But at the same time, it's also like inspiring to realize that these little bits of, pushing forward did inspire hope. Because like there's one point where Mrs. Till realizes that, like she might not win this, but she's going to end up being thrust into like the civil rights fight. And while her concern is mostly about just getting justice for her son, she realizes that might not happen and that there's a bigger battle to fight here that she needs to continue onward. And on that level, the film mostly just works just because Danielle's performance just is the main reason to watch this film. In terms of like, depicting this tragedy, it's a little bit tactile. Like there's a few great emotional moments I like that we get to spend with Emmett. And there's a very tearful climax when Mrs. Till like kind of like looks back on the life of Emmett and the youth that was robbed from him. That it does kind of like give you a little bit of a gut punch. But for like, at least for like most of like the middle portion of this film, it kind of goes by the numbers and in terms of like, framing, the events that happen there. So a very tactile film, but again, with this type of movie, where it excels best is with its acting, and Danielle Deadwyler gives probably one of like the better performances of this year. That should not be missed. Like of course she's on the cover of the film, obviously, so she's the reason to watch this film. So in addition to just being like an important historical drama, it's also well acted, and it feels as hopeful as it is angering. So it's a great Great film. So Till, I believe Till isn't in any theaters right now because it was released in limited release about 2 months ago, and I just got the for your consideration screener a few days ago. So, but yeah, if you can check that out on, I'm trying to think what service it would be. I think it's through United Artists. So, like, I know it's distributed through Universal, so it might, Universal's for international, so it might be through Peacock, possible, but you might have to keep an eye out for like what streaming services might be on. But if you can, check it out, because like if you're looking towards films that you got to check out before the end of the year that are going to be heavy on like Oscar nominations, Till is probably going to be up there for Best Actress, for sure. If not a Chivy, because I know that's like the big one they're pushing for. Of course, all these for your consideration movies, they always push for like for everything that they can. So and of course they push for everything that they can get, but like they'll usually only get like a few. Till will probably get just best. It'll probably be nominated for Best Actress. It might be nominated for Best Picture. It's quite possible, I think, given like the assortment of films this year, and it might get in for like a few other supporting roles or probably like maybe a tad few like technical roles. But yeah, like with for your consideration campaigns, they submit for everything. Like here, I'll give you an example. So here's 13 Lives, which is a film that I liked. It's a Ron Howard film about, you know, like the rescue of like the 13 trapped boys of a soccer team who had to have like a daring rescue with like spelunkers who had to go in there and fish them out. It's a great, like, if you like Ron Howard's films that are very like technical and they focus on like the little details of tragedies and real life events, it's not a bad film. It's pretty good. But of course, they're submitting it for everything. So, you know, Best Picture, Best Directing, Best Screenplay, Production Design, Cinematography, Actors, Acting, all that. So they always do that, with the exception of a few films. Like, for some, like, foreign or the international films, they'll usually just try to, like, submit it just for, like, you know, Best Foreign Language Film, you know, stuff like that. But that's, you know, that's par for the course, you know. So, yeah, there's a lot of films coming out this year, and there's still more to cover. I did not even cover half the films that we have for your consideration campaigns, which is why next week I am going to do another stream, and we're going to cover even more films than the ones that I covered on this stream. Just to give an example of the films that I'll be covering next week, I'll be covering Babylon, the new Damien Chazelle film about I guess like the golden era of Hollywood, like the transitional part of Hollywood from like a silent era to color and film, not color and sound. That's what I wanted to say. Which I wanted to talk about on this stream, but I can't officially review it because the embargo doesn't drop until tomorrow. So I almost kind of feel like I should have done the stream tomorrow, but I'll save Babylon for next week. I will say though, oh my god, Babylon. This film is just ooh. Oh my god. I think it might be my favorite Damien Chazelle film. I'm just saying. I'll also say this too. The first 5 minutes of the film and the last 5 minutes, I doubt you would believe me if I told you what happens in that film. And I don't know how much more I could sell you on it. I'll probably dig into some spoilers next week when I get more into it. But yeah, we'll talk about Babylon then. We'll also talk about She Said, the story about the New York Times journalist behind the Harvey Weinstein case. God, what else we'll talk about Women Talking, the screener I had over there, about a women in a religious commune making the tough choice of deciding to leave. What else will we talk about? Oh yes, I almost forgot, because we're doing a whole lot of for your consideration campaigns, but it wouldn't wouldn't be the holidays without a family movie shoved in there. So we'll be talking about the new Puss in Boots movie. I have not seen it yet, but I will be seeing it very, very soon here. So yeah, we'll find out if that DreamWorks film is any good. And oh my god, what else are we talking about? There's too many screeners that I've got copies for that I've got to consider. I think that there's some more documentaries like Wildcat. There's another foreign language film, Argentina 1985, which I'll eventually cover, and so much more. So yeah, well, next week I'm gonna try to. It's gonna be crunch time. I'm gonna try to cover as much as I can before the end of the year, and even then, if I don't by the end of the year, I'll try to cover everything else that I can. And then eventually do a best of the year, which is it's chaos right now. It's chaos. I think I'm seeing at least like 15 films a week at this point, just trying to get caught up with everything. So, so yeah, I guess that's my cue. So let's get the music going there and do a quick recap of what we had on today's stream. So here's everything that we reviewed on this stream. So let's see. So Violent Night. Violent Night is an absolutely hilarious, exciting, and just plain fun Christmas action movie. This is probably going to be a Christmas classic. As I said, saddle this right next to like Silent Night, Deadly Night, and well, hell, maybe even Krampus, I guess, and The Green Knight, and just... It's just a fun film. Just go see it in the theater. It's a lot of fun. Oh, thank you so much, A. Tatum. Thank you. Happy holidays. Go watch Santa stab someone with a candy cane and the Christmas tree star. It's fun. Hope you're enjoying the holiday season. All right, Avatar: The Way of Water. Somewhat surprisingly, but I guess like not all that surprisingly, is James Cameron's film is still a lot of fun. It's still great to get lost within Pandora. I feel like it's a little bit better of a script here. I wish there was a little bit more time spent with the characters, but in terms of spending time with this world, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, and it's so much fun to see in the theater. We also reviewed Empire of Light. Sam Mendes' film about working at a cinema in 1980s England with a romance between Olivia Colman and Michael Ward, and they're just so adorable, and it's such a sweet, touching film that just washes over you with a sad yet sincere and beautiful and wonderful feeling. What a wonderful film. Great little breath of fresh air from all like the chaos going on this holiday season. Fire of Love, the documentary about the two volcanologists who loved each other so much and became engrossed with their work with volcanoes. And it's fascinating, it's fun, and it's definitely one of the best documentaries of the year. Go check it out. It's on Disney Plus right now. Goodnight Oppie, the story of Opportunity, the rover that accomplished great things. It's a wonderful, wonderful documentary. And it's currently playing on Amazon Prime. And finally, Till, the Emmett Till story, which is kind of about what you'd expect. It's a very like tactile film, but it's worth seeing just for the performance by Danielle Deadwyler alone. She makes this film work, and she's the reason to keep watching, and makes the important message ring all the more true. So, there you go. That was our stream. We covered a ton of films. I'll try to have the reviews sometime up by next week. But this was a lot of fun. I have way more films to cover before we even get to Christmas. And definitely before we get to the new year as I cover everything else. So tune in next week. We will be covering the new Puss in Boots film. We'll be covering Women Talking, She Said, and a whole bunch of other films that just escaped my mind at the moment. Oh, Babylon. Definitely. We definitely got to talk about Babylon next week. And don't think I got plenty to say about Babylon. Trust me. I think it's a little early to say, but I think it might be on my top 10 list for this year. I'll just throwing that out there. Just throwing that out there. So yeah, tune in then. Oh wait, I got to get the credits up here. So if you want to check out more of my reviews and read other stuff that I've been working on, check out movieswithmark.com. That's where I post most of my reviews. You can also find my Rotten Tomatoes recognized reviews. Those are over on filminquiry.com. And you can check out a few more of my essays as well as interviews with a bunch of people at TwinCitiesGeek.com. In particular, I most recently interviewed Phil Lamar. Yeah, Samurai Jack himself. And it was, my God, not to harp on this a little bit of a tangent, but Phil Lamar is one of the nicest people I've ever talked to. And just, I love the fact that I got to geek out with him about talking about like DC Comics. So just a little side. I'm sorry, it was so much fun to have that happen. So yeah, go check out those websites. And yeah, I'll be back next week with even more reviews. So until then, have a good one, everybody.